talking about products. We're going to be talking about how a company can go about looking into the future and how an organization, if you're a designer or product manager within those organizations and you're responsible for the next set of features for your product, you have to think about how you're defending your organization, your product against the competition. The competition will try to clone you, they will try to clone your features, and investors also ask from you that you create moat, which are the defendabilities that will allow your company to thrive into the marketplace. One of the defendabilities that people don't talk about is sustainability, which can basically become a differentiator for any organization. We'll talk a lot about Tesla today, but we're also going to talk about how an organization like yours, let it be a startup or let it be a scale-up, could basically start leveraging sustainable practices in order to become more efficient and use that efficiency as a way to increase the valuation of your organization. I wanted to introduce you to Javier today, and you want to just give a little introduction before we begin?
Sure, thank you for that, Paul. Hi, nice to see you all in this SaaS Summit for my first time here. So I'm very glad I'm here meeting most of you outside. So my name is Javier Adan. I work in Vistaprint. You might have seen us if you've walked around. We have a stand there, 110. I work for Vistaprint. We are partners for SMBs and for startups in their marketing journey, helping them with print and with design. But my function within the company is to work, I lead the product design team that helps to bring all those products live into the market. So I'm looking forward for the conversation with you today, Paul.
Perfect. So first question is that at Tesla, we're going to use Tesla as an example. They basically have this big, hairy, ambitious goal of making the future a carbon neutral world. And to do so, they basically have to offer us very cheap cars. There's a strategy that Elon Musk put in place where the first car was going to be a very expensive car, and he was going to keep on decreasing the cost of that car to make it available for the mass market. But one of the missions of that product, and every product manager who basically works around the Tesla, is to make the cost of a Tesla pretty cheap, low cost of ownership. And that's part of their value proposition, that's part of their product mission. But in order to decrease the cost of product ownership, what they do is they find ingenious ways to basically add features to the product to make it low cost. So you guys must have heard that if you get a Tesla, you can go and charge it for free at any Tesla station. That's low cost of ownership. You also know that you can buy battery packs at a very, very cheap price. That's because Tesla has invested in basically solar energy. And you know that whenever you buy a Tesla, it actually comes bundled with insurance, which actually decreases the cost of ownership of a Tesla. So the question really is, this type of thinking about the sustainable future from a context of the consumer has to basically, doesn't have to pay a premium for it. Actually, you know, having a sustainable future doesn't mean that the cost of a product has to go up. What are your thoughts on that?
100% agree. I couldn't agree more. There's this misperception both in customers but also in the business and for B2B companies that having a sustainable option needs to come with some level of liability, whether it's a cheaper quality, a poorer quality, a worse performance for whatever reason, or as you were saying in the case of Tesla, a higher cost of maintenance. Now, companies need to take that sustainability approach, bring it back to their design thinking and in the product modeling and in the product creation, and embed it as a part of the backbone to try to come up with what is the actual value proposition and how they're going to inject those sustainability concepts and ideas to make their product nourish. Now, as Paul was saying, 2015 agreements from Paris are like a little bit far away. But we're heading into a new tipping point where those sustainability metrics will become more important. And most of the companies and the investors are now asking for those reports for companies to see how sustainable you are in most of the things. How sustainable is the product that you're offering? You as a startup, you bring an idea, but how really sustainable is that from all angles?
So just to illuminate everyone actually on that, sorry.
No problem.
There is this ISO standard, ISO 16004, I believe. Yeah, which basically mandates that every organization needs to basically provide its carbon emissions similar to how you file your taxes. And countries like France and Germany are now urging most organizations, especially hedge fund companies who basically own and invest in startups and other organizations, to basically provide yearly reports that quantify the carbon emissions of every organization they own, and also as a step two to start actively trying to reduce those carbon emissions. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's critical, again, the more, again, it's coming back to that part of the tipping point where we are at today. Having traceability, having transparency on those metrics, and that ISO norm is helping a lot of that, is helping all of us to do that final step into bringing more sustainable products and to embed sustainability as part of the key development of our products. Now, the ISO is a great example because it forces all of us to do that step. And going back to the very beginning, you were talking about a moat. I like the idea of building a moat around your value proposition. Now, that sustainability barrier can create moats around your products because now it's going to be public, it's going to be transparent, everyone's going to be able to see it.
That's true, because when you're basically a startup, as well as a scale-up, you're trying to 10x your company. The word 10x basically is you're trying to multiply the valuation of your organization by 10 times or more. So to make it more, desirable to the investors, you need to basically figure out tactics. For example, you need to have a very lean system, high margins, your EBITDA has to be high, but you also have to think a little bit about how big is your total addressable market, what are the efficiencies you've created, and how you innovate in your organization. But I think that incorporating sustainability inside your company for all future things that you do will actually definitely increase that moat and increase that 10x factor.
Couldn't agree more. So similar to what we were asking, some years ago, we were asking product managers to, hey, you need to be customer-centric. You need to put customer at the beginning, hear them, talk to them, and embed that skill, and get that skill back to your product management skills. We asked them to get finance skill and know about numbers, know about hand management, all of that. Likewise, now we need to ask them, now you need to learn this new set of tools and skills that you're going to take with you to build those fortress for your value proposition.
So for example, if I'm a product manager at Tesla and I go and I say, we need to basically give our customers cheap energy. So what do you say? How do you do that? So do you go? There's a cost of buying energy, and then if you buy hydroelectric electricity or gasoline energy, like combustible energy, that basically increases your carbon footprint. So how, as a product manager, what would you suggest to basically decrease those costs?
So you need to go, the Tesla example is a good one, but you need to think about every single industry where you are. It's about walking upwards the supply chain of what you have created, whether you have created a digital product or a physical product. You need to walk up all those steps high to the chain to find where are the non-sustainable pieces of those and try to ideate different systems to break those down. In the case of Tesla, it might be about where you create the energy. You really, as you were saying, you buy fuel. Well, it doesn't seem very sustainable, doesn't seem very attractive from a cost of ownership perspective. You might need to create it, the energy, and that brings to a different level of questions.
So it means going to Mars and harvesting it there and bringing it back,
which is a great idea, right? It's a good idea.
But I think you're right. Like when you look at Amazon and the way they basically operate, they look at their entire supply chain of how fast they can basically give you that package under one day. And that supply chain is automated. At some point, they did this efficiency exercise where they're trying to eliminate as much manual labor and repetition from there, introducing robots and software and all kinds of measures in order to allow that to be human-free, not from the context of they want robots, but from the context of they want to eliminate human mistakes. They want things to be able to operate 24/7. And I think the same thing needs to happen from a sustainability perspective. Look at your entire supply chain and ask yourself what can be eliminated in terms of high carbon producing function or approach that we've taken, and what is the renewable energy that we're going to utilize in order to basically decrease the carbon footprint, right?
100%. And again, going back to what you were saying on the ISO that you were presenting, that is helping you also as a startup or as a business to go up your value chain, and you need to ask your suppliers, your people you work with, for accountability on all of those things to, hey, you need to provide me that data so I get to know my product better. I need to understand what are the choices that I've done that have created the carbon footprint that I have created. So that whole system is now in this, I really feeling that we're really in this tipping point where we're like about to break.
Yeah, well, right now the biggest issue is that quantifying your carbon footprint is one of the hardest things to do. It almost requires you to go and do the sampling manually, which is also very hard. So if you ask a farmer, what is your carbon footprint? I mean, farmers do actually emanate quite a lot of green gases, but they don't know how to quantify it. But if you were working, let's say, with a farm in order to harvest and use it as your source of whatever you're going to be creating, I mean, how do you empower that farm to basically quantify it for you, so this way you could be transparent with your audience and your users?
Completely.
So
100%.
so I think that if you were to look at your product top down and say, as a mission of my product, for me to increase the valuation of my organization, I'm going to add an additional defendability, which is me defending myself against the competition by using sustainability and the quantification of our carbon emissions across our supply chain as an element, a transparent element that is going to allow both customers and users to benefit from it, and as well as the organization to benefit from it. I think that's a step in the right direction.
Again, I keep going back to that word that you said about being a moat. I really like it because it's really visual. I mean, you need to stop thinking about the sustainability component of the product development as a chore and start thinking about it as a mode to your value proposition. Because, again, as you were saying, several hedge funds are now asking for all those reports, and customers are starting to demand that information. So the more you're able to get that mode around you, the easier it's going to be to have a sustainable value proposition in the market.
Just to make sure everybody understands the word moat, it's basically in a medieval castle, that body of water that surrounds the castle that prevents the enemies from attacking you. In the VC world is referred as moat, as the way you basically protect your company from the competition, from people who are going to steal your features away and try to emulate you. So sustainability as an element here is definitely a path forward for the future. So if you were Uber, how would you basically adopt sustainability best practices?
That's a good one. So I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll have to go back again, follow our own example, go back to the value chain, understand where are those carbon emission black points that we have, and try to figure out one by one. I guess you have to look at the
carbon emission of every car.
Exactly, the cars that you have. What is the data you have? What is those models? What are they doing? And how can you help them to do the change?
So I guess like a future, this is a great example, because a future of, let's say, Ubers all being electric cars, that means that Uber needs to invest in a source of energy that's renewable, that's going to fuel those cars, because ultimately if they depend on third party, the cost of riding an Uber for the consumer is just going to keep going up, I assume, right? So does that mean that every business that basically has a huge fleet of vehicles, let's just say, is now going to be in this race for harvesting energy in some ways?
Well, I hope that we will see some startups today that can also play that race. You can also, you don't need to do everything by yourself. You need to find also partners that can work and can help you to create those ponds of good intention and good products. So I hope that we don't all have to race for our own solar plates to do energy by ourselves.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of countries purchase excess amounts of clean energy from for example, in Canada, we have a lot of hydroelectricity, and New York State has basically created a 30-year contract to purchase that hydroelectricity. They don't need it as a surplus, but they definitely see that future coming. So, the future of product management could also be not about the product and the users, but also how you go about making sure that your supply chain and what powers your supply chain is also basically sustainable and thing. So what do you think the impact is? I know that Germany and France are pioneering this ISO approach where your company needs to, similar to taxes, provide reports that quantify. What do you think the impact of that is? Do you think it's going to be easy for companies to adjust themselves to it?
So change comes with disruption sometimes. And I think that, again, I keep coming back to this tipping point concept. I do feel, I've been working in the product development for several years. When I started, sustainability was just like a small part of our assortment. It was just sitting there. Again, not paying much attention. And as I was saying in the beginning, it was like almost a low quality, always like the child you don't really want to look at sometimes. And it has climbed the ladder to be at the center. Now, I feel now, and where we've run the last investigations with customers over the last couple of months for our own company, Mr. Pin, to understand how to bring sustainability live, I see more and more the demand from customers to get that information from the real end customer. Hey, I want to know what this product does for my
It's like calories for food. You want to know exactly what's
It's
inside.
likewise, you're in the supermarket. You can now see in the supermarket, everyone with their phone, every now and then, just checking the calories of everything that they buy. Likewise, they're doing it with the products. And that is pushing, again, that is the ultimate strength. Now, that creates a lot of complexity, as you were saying, in terms of adoption and how to do that. But again, I'm not going to name it. I saw several startups yesterday that they're playing in that area and how to blockchain bring you that information back with an API so that you can fastly connect and get that information right away from your customers on site. Those are great connections and great things that are going to spin up and are going to start to really accelerate the wheel on bringing that information live. So
Yeah. Would you actually not work with a supplier, for example, if they can't transparently provide you their carbon footprint emissions?
I think we need to reach to that point, yes, consciously. I think, for example, and that's a good question, and I think, again, because I'm not a startup, I need to admit, I mean, we're a big company. Vistaprint's a big company, for those who know us. But we also have a responsibility there. And I think one of the key things that we need to do as a big company is to be two things, if you allow me. Be clear on commitments. Let's be clear about what we want to do. The big ones say, hey, 2040 carbon neutral, so that everyone knows that. Because on the one side, that will help the startups also to understand where the industry is going. And they will also see, well, there's a market there because these people is going that way. So being vocal, being open on those things helps the industry also to say, hey, there's a path forward. And on the other side, being extremely humble on the actual small things that we do, and talking about the specifics and trying to be as transparent and as educational as possible on the saying, hey, this paper that you bought today, this is bought with this forest from here, and this is the carbon footprint of this specific product that you've done, so that you are tackling both ends, and that helps that visibility.
I agree. And it's not always about transportations or companies that have huge supply chains. I think if you're working at Facebook, Google, companies that leverage huge server farms. If I was a product manager at YouTube, I think that my business is all about video and people, eyeballs watching ads, right? But ultimately, like those server farms, they consume a lot of energy. And Google has pledged to basically reduce the emissions from those server farms. But how do you, as a product manager, feel empowered to suggest alternatives? Because it's very odd for a product manager to go to their boss and say, maybe we should think about reducing the carbon emissions of our server farms. But if it comes from the top, if the CEO has put inside their strategies, their big, hairy, ambitious goals for the next 10 years is going to be to reduce carbon emissions, and as a moat for the organization, they are going to pass sustainability best practices as thing, then it empowers the product managers and designers to suggest alternatives that are going to help the company.
Two thoughts on that. Very first one. The first thing is I tell to my team, just be brave. If you have two options and the one that is sustainable is better because you feel that it's better, because you have the numbers that is better, but you're still afraid of killing the other one because still all the market is there, be brave. Try it out. Let's see what happens. I know it's easy from my position, from Vistaprint as a big company, and maybe a little bit more challenged, but the startups also have a lot of braveness on them. So be brave on those. Come to those propositions and let expose that. That's one. And the second one might be contradictory. Again, Rome wasn't built in a day. So step by step, one step today, one step tomorrow. But keep moving so that you will fail someday, but just keep moving and keep advancing on that road.
Having worked with a lot of startups, I feel that they oftentimes don't even think about efficiencies. They're only thinking about increasing their addressable market. That's what VCs push them towards. And I think there is a investor community sensibilization that needs to be done to basically push startups to start thinking about this from the get-go. And ultimately, anyways, those VCs are going to have to produce those papers and reports back to the government. So I feel that it's a self-feeding cycle where VCs will push startups to think about it, startups will think about it and act on it, and then those numbers will feed up to the government, and hopefully we'll live in a carbon-free or greenhouse-free or carbon-neutral world, and that I think that is the ultimate future we're all seeking for.
To the end, I mean, we're in this together, all of us, like startups, big companies, government institutions. It's about how all of us we create an ecosystem of work that helps us to get there. So 100%. Couldn't agree more.
Thank you very much for all your feedback. I appreciate it.
Good.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.